This is from The Missing Link. Nothing on earth can be more paradoxical than truth. For truth represents both the form and the formless. Without one, the other is only half the puzzle. Without one, the other is of little value and is a cosmic lie. As we start to regain the true relationship between our personal intelligence and the spiritual wisdom that lies within, we develop a higher degree of intelligence and common sense. This, in turn, clears up our misguided lives. So the honest conversation, what I've really noticed is that there is sometimes a misconception about that there's nothing to be done, as in we've just got to get peaceful and then there's nothing to be done. When in fact we see in the world things are being done. And it makes me wonder, well, what's all that about? An example is dealing with work colleagues or employees or people who are in a leadership role, dealing with that complexity of relationships. And what I've realized more and more is that any conversation can be had from truth. Let me say that again in a different way. When a conversation is had from a neutral space or from a loving space, it can be a harsh conversation. It can be difficult. It can be letting somebody go who's working for you, or telling somebody that things aren't really working the way that you thought that they should be working. And they can be really hard conversations. But when we get really neutral, actually what we have to say can be said with a blanket of love, because it can be said from truth. So a really quick example is, if you've been in a relationship with somebody and you know that you want to break up, and you really know that you want to break up, and I don't know if I'm the only one that said, well, it's not the right time because it's their birthday next week, or then it's Valentine's, then it's Christmas, not in any order, this isn't. Then there's this, then we're going on holiday, and there never seems to be the right time, because what we're really doing is we're putting off this conversation that we don't want to have. We don't want to hurt someone, and we don't want to feel like the bad guy. We don't want to hurt ourselves. So that makes it all very muddy and difficult. But actually, when we get quiet and we get neutral about what we want to say, we can say it and the person can hear the truth of it, even though they could still feel hurt, even though we could still feel shitty. If it's come from love and it's come from truth, it has an anesthetic with it that makes the hurt a little less, last a little less longer, and one can hear the truth of it. And I'll give you a story of my own that some people have heard. So I went to Salt Spring Island, and they used to have the 3 Principles School on Salt Spring Island, and it's a 3-day thing, and it's all relaxing, and It's all beautiful. And when you go to Salt Spring Island, there's the option to travel by ferry from Vancouver. And it's a slow ferry, and it stops at all these other little islands along the way, and you get to see seals basking in the sun, and birds, and the water's lapping against the boats. So you really get to start to slow right down and feel, you know, more in rhythm with life. And so I went there with my husband Rob, and we spent some time there. So we spent some time there, then we had the school. So it's all beautiful and slow and relaxing. And then Rob went home, and I stayed to have 4 days mentoring with Elsie Spittle. And I'm in this beautiful Airbnb that you could see the sunset from my balcony, and the ferries coming into the port. And it was just idyllic. Hummingbirds on the tree. It was completely idyllic. So on the first day of my mentoring with Elsie Spittle, off I went in my little truck, and went to her house. And she invited me in, and it's a thrill to go to Elsie Spittle's house, you know. And she let me hold, as an aside, she let me hold a first edition of Second Chance by Sydney Banks. And it literally vibrated. The book was just, yeah, it was crazy. And so, you know, she put that back in its cabinet, and she said, sit down and we'll have some lunch. And we had salmon that her husband had caught in the stream, and vegetables from the local market. And we had this gorgeous day. It was beautiful. We sat in the garden. And then it was the end of the day, and I drove back to my Airbnb. And I drove back and I thought, is that it? I thought Elsie was going to do some sort of magic on me, and, you know, like I'd be transformed and so on. And I thought, wow, is that it? Is that what she does? She just like has lunch and a conversation. And, you know, I mean, the salmon was nice, but, you know, really expensive salmon for what you pay for the coaching. So I was really in my head. So the next morning, I thought, right, I'll take along all the things I need to work on. No, you see, you can all forgive yourselves for any time you get in your heads, because I've been in the game a long time by that time, and I still thought that's what I needed to do. So I went along to Elsie's, and I brought all these things with me that I felt that needed to be worked through. And so Elsie, oh, you know, how are you? And I said, wow. And then I just went blah, 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 blah. For roughly about 20 minutes. I didn't stop. And the speed that was coming out of my mouth was even faster in my head. So my head was just with all the things that I needed to tell her that she could do the magic wand and make go away. And after about 20 minutes, could have been a bit longer, Elsie was sat in her living room on a sofa at one side of the room, and I was sat on a sofa at the other side of the room. And after, you know, some time, I said, is that making sense? And, you know, paused for a breath. And I had noticed that Elsie's face was a bit sort of glazed over. And she said, I think you need to lie down. And I said, pardon? And she said, well, I do. I was stunned. So I said, really? And she said, yes. And she said, you lie down there and I'll lie down here. And she turned around and she put a little grey head on the arm of the sofa and put her little feet up, and I think she might have had a throw, and put the throw over her and just lay down. So I thought, "Oh, okay, I'll lie down then." So I lay down, and my view was I could see the sky out of her window, and I could see the clouds, and I was looking at the clouds, and I felt a bit hurt. I felt a bit stung. And while I was lying there a bit stung, looking at the clouds, I sort of just got a little bit more peaceful, and I thought, Actually, why did I just do that? I don't even like it when people do that to me, like natter my head up and then I can't see the wood for the trees. Like that's very strange." So, that went through my head, and I thought, "Oh, well, there you go." So I lay down and eventually drifted off with the clouds, drifted off to sleep. And then Elsie came by and said, "Oh, shall we go for a little ride out?" And we got up, and she took me around the island in her little car, and we looked. She pointed out places that Sid lived, and she put some Sid on the tape, and it was all very peaceful. But my mind was really quiet, really, really quiet, silent. I would say it was silent. There was nothing going on in there. And she dropped me home, and later that evening, I ended up writing a poem about silence being your friend, and actually cancelled my session with her the next day because I felt that I just needed to be on my own and just with myself. Anyway, there's more to that story that happened later, but for now, I want to just pause it there. Because when I met with Elsie later that day, she said, "Oh, how are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, just so relaxed, so peaceful." And she said, "I've never said to anybody that they had to lie down before. I've never had to say that." And she said, I didn't want to hurt you, but it seemed to me exactly the right thing to say. And I could see that it stung you. And I said, "It did sting me, but I could see the truth of it. I could see why you would say that." So she said, "Yes, because it came wrapped in a blanket of love." And I realized that for Elsie, the glazed over look and feeling that she was having indicated to her that this wasn't the direction, this wasn't the place where we both needed to be, especially me. And that the only thing that she could come to mind was, "I think we need to have a lie down." But it came from a place of her wanting the best for me. It came from a spiritual source. And so therefore, even with the sting, because I could hear the truth, somehow the anesthetic of the truth calmed my mind enough to enable me to relax and drift off. And then, the thinking had gone, and just enjoy the silence. And so whenever I've got to have that honest conversation with other people, whatever that is, my best bet is to go to the quietest place I can go to in my mind and get out of the personal, what it means, why you should have said this, why that shouldn't have happened. Get out of the personal and go to the truth of what's really going on. And the truth of what's really going on can sometimes be just as simple as there isn't a fit, or this just doesn't work right now, whether it's, love, work, or otherwise. And instead of dressing that up with all the reasons, I can simply go there and the rest follows. And that's made those conversations much more honest, because I'm not trying to shield myself or anybody else, and much kinder.